everyone, and welcome to the Teach Middle East podcast. I'm Lisa Grace. Today, I have with me Mark Leppard, and he is the headmaster of the British School Al Khubairat in Abu Dhabi. And we're going to be talking well-being. We're going to be talking staff well-being, leaders well-being, and student well-being.
You are listening to the Teach Middle East podcast, connecting, developing, and empowering educators.
Before we get into the conversation, I'd just ask Mark to give us a brief intro. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me. I follow you on Twitter, and it's really interesting. So to be able to contribute, hopefully it'll be positive. So I'm headmaster of the British School Al Khubairat. I've been in that position for 6 years. Before that, I was a principal at Doha College in Qatar. So I've been in the Middle East for 25 years in total, and I worked out, it's actually 26 years this year. So I've been overseas in the Middle East for half of my life, in 52. So that puts it in perspective. I can see your face. I know the audience won't, but yeah, there is a shock to when people say that. I've been teaching 28 years in total. I'm happily married to Paulette, my wife, who's the most tolerant person, for 21 years. 3 children, Max, Murray and Millie, aged 20, 19 and 16. The 2 boys are studying at Newcastle University and the University of Leeds, and my daughter's studying at the British School Al Khubairat in sixth form. And my children have gone through their entire schooling with me working at the school. So they've probably got a few battle scars along the way.
Thank you. I'm in shock because I normally hear people say, I've been out here long, and then they come up with a number like 5 years. But then when you hear 20 odd years, you're going, wow, now that is definitely a long, long time being out here. And how have you enjoyed it? I mean, you obviously have enjoyed it to have stayed that long, but how have you found the changes since you've been in this region?
Yeah, I've loved it. I love the culture. I love the diversity. I love the fact that there is really strong traditions and heritage, but also an outward-looking region that embraces visitors, expatriates coming here. And I love that big melting pot. I really do. Yeah, changes. Well, physical changes. You know, some of the places that you see now were literally sand areas, things like that. But what I've seen is a real move forward technologically, business-wise, many areas, but still with a grasp on the rich traditions. And for me, that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, I've been out here for 10 years plus, and yeah, I do love it, but I don't know if I'll be able to make it to 20 odd years out here. The pull and the push is definitely there. We're talking well-being today, and so we wanted to start off by asking, what does well-being mean to you? How do you define it?
I'm glad you said to me, because I think there's many definitions. If you look online, there's the 7 aspects of wellbeing, the 3 aspects, the 5 aspects. There's lots of different things, but I genuinely try and keep things simple in my mind for me to manage it. And I think it helps with everything we do at the school. So for me, wellbeing is being able to cope with the daily ups and downs of life and having the tools to cope when you're euphoric and also when you're really low. It's not about always being happy. I think that's a false sense of wellbeing. For me, it's trying to help staff, students, yourself, and giving them the tools that when things are great, you can identify that. When things are not so great, you get tools to help you out of that. So it's about having the tools to cope.
Yeah, I like the fact that you say it's not about not having difficulties, because a lot of times people get this well-being as the ideal life where everything is going to be great all the time. And it's a bit of a hot topic now. We hear so much about well-being, until you tend to wonder, why is it such a hot topic now? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a good one you say that. And I think just go back a little bit, the always being happy concept as well. I think it's important that students fail at times to learn. I think it's important we do. You know, you saw me fail just trying to plug my headset in a minute ago, but you learn. Oh no, next time actually look at the sign on the side. That's me learning. And so I think it's important that well-being is a topic, but I also think it's been a topic for a long time. If in schools, where schools were really good with pastoral care, I think the word well-being is a newer word, so it's a bit of a hot topic in that way. The bit I think is genuinely new is our willingness to have a conversation about it. I think some people in the past, and this isn't right or wrong, I just think it's a cultural shift, but I think some people saw if you talked about your emotions as a weakness. So we masked over it, we sticky tape over it, a plaster. If you say, I'm not feeling too good emotionally, people would see you as weak. Where I think now there is more of a conversation. As I say, in our life, we'll have highs and lows. So for me, it's the ability to be able to talk about it. And I think that's been the change. I don't think there's necessarily a change in how, there maybe obviously things improve and how we care for it, but the ability to raise it as an issue. And the analogy I use is if you had something wrong with your heart, you'd go to a cardiologist tomorrow. You just go, if you have something wrong, and I'll say head, but with your emotions, what's wrong with going to somebody, be it a family member, a friend, a professional, to help you through that? I think that's the change, where it's becoming more accessible, not in terms of it's out there, but we're actually being brave to actually take the step towards it.
Yeah. And do you think that it's actually come to a boiling point with everything that's going on currently?
Yeah, if wellbeing was ever going to be challenged in our lifetime, probably a pandemic is one of the ones that would put you to the test. And I spoke to our leadership team this week, and we were talking about staff wellbeing, just as a general topic. And my biggest concern at the moment, and I'm not talking about one individual or another, but it's a circumstance of people, is those who are here alone, away from home. So I've got my children here, as I said to you just before. For me, that's been a real blessing. And I think having my family around me has helped me through that pandemic of possible isolation, because we've actually become close and we're a support mechanism. There'll be some people out there who don't have their families here. They may be single, or they may be living overseas while their families are in another country. And I think their well-being has probably come to the fore more as a discussion point. So, yeah, I do think the current circumstance has raised concerns beyond a daily concern, where we say we've actually got to act to help this person rather than just this person help themselves.
Yeah, that's true. And you know that the issue I find as well with well-being, and if we think about it from a school's perspective, is that there hasn't always been space and that safety to talk about it in schools. And I find that now, with it being so topical, that safety is being created.
Yeah, I'd agree 100%. And I think you've hit the key word, safety. It's not seen as bravado or machoism to avoid talking about it. You know, I'm slightly sort of, pigeonholing there, but I think being able to talk about it safely, if something's not right, I know later on I'll talk about this, but if something's not right, one, having the courage to talk about it, but courage only comes when you feel that there's a support mechanism around you as well. And I think having that support makes you more courageous to bring that topic up, because it's not about exposing yourselves in a way that's negative. It's opening up and saying, I need some help here.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I'm so excited about this conversation today is because I'm normally talking to teachers about well-being. I'm normally talking to a teacher who says I'm burnt out, or my well-being is really being tested right now. And so to have a headmaster talking about well-being is quite unique. I'm really, really pleased to be able to have this conversation with you. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what do you think is causing this whole, I call it an epidemic really, of teacher burnout, because all my friends, and I taught here and I've taught in the UK and back home and here, they're all saying the same thing. We are feeling burnt out. We're feeling tired. We're not well mentally. What's causing this, do you think?
Yeah, it's a good point. And it's interesting, you said you've got a headmaster. I still teach as well. I always put that one out there because I think it's important. I'm in the classroom myself. So if the photocopier is not working, I understand it's not working. I don't teach the same volume, but I think I've got to keep in touch with what my team of teachers are doing and not be isolated. So,
wow, that's our next one. Our next one is, why should head teachers or headmasters stay in the classroom at some level? Obviously, they can't have a full load, but that's going to be our next one, Mark. Yeah, but yeah, what's called?
Yeah, okay. Part of it is, I'm going to be really honest here, because I think that's the only way I like to operate. I think part of it is self-inflicted, because it's not a job, it's a passion, it's a vocation. So I think teachers are perfectionists and often put pressure on themselves to do more and more. And I think the pressure comes from external as well. It's not just the teacher, but, demanding parents, league tables, results, all of these things are pressures. But I also think teachers are their own worst enemy at times, because they want to do the very best job they can. That's not the only reason, but I think it's important to put that out there as well. high levels of bureaucracy in certain organisations or certain regions or certain institutions, high levels of accountability. They can cause stress. Again, going back to, you're almost riding on the back of someone's perfectionism and passion for the role, and then adding accountability and bureaucracy. They want to do it all well. And yet my question is, and I try and ask this, I don't always, is what we're doing in terms of bureaucracy, a check or creating a system within a school, an organisation, at the end of the day, is it making the teaching role easier so that the teacher can be the best they can to the students? Because if the answer is no, then I don't know why we do it. Now, I'm not saying we're perfect, and there's things I'd like to change, and there's things we have to take time over. But I think if we put something in place, we should always be saying, will this enable the teacher to be better in the classroom, to give the students a better educational experience? If you can't answer that with a yes or that's our aim, then we shouldn't be doing it. What we've done here is we've taken away lesson observations with grading to say this teacher's outstanding, etc., etc. We still have lesson observations, but a lot of them are actually invited by the teacher, and we start from a position of trust. I've appointed the majority of people, or my team have, or the leadership have. If we're not getting it right on that team, it should reflect on us, not on the teacher. We've got it wrong somewhere. So we start from a position of trust, and we presume, I very rarely in an interview ask about their classroom experience, because my team, the head of physics, if it's a physics teacher, a primary deputy head, will ask about those things. If they're in the room across the table from me, I'm asking whether they'll fit culturally in our school and what they're going to offer the students. Because for me, that we can develop someone into a great teacher, but we can also crush them with bureaucracy and systems. So let's start from a position of trust. And our staff observations aren't judgmental, they're developmental. So a teacher will say, can you come in and see this? I think I'm doing really well with my group work, but there's something not quite right. Can you come in and just a fresh set of eyes? And it doesn't have to be the head of school. We have colleagues going in, we have line managers going in, we have NQTs going in, because they might have done something fresh from university that we haven't seen before. So it's about making sure the classroom experience is the best it can be for the students. And the only way we can do that is by continually supporting our teachers to improve.
I like the fact that you go in with trust as the backing for your observations, because I've long, championed this no grading of lesson observations. What does it do if you say to me, I'm outstanding? Or what does it do if you say to me, I'm poor, based on you seeing one lesson? Okay, you might have seen 3 lessons, but how does that help me to improve? And even if you tell me that I'm outstanding, how does that make me a better teacher tomorrow? So I'm glad. I think any school listening, if you have the will, there is a way to do observations without having them being graded. I like that. Now let's talk a little bit about what you do as a school to ensure staff well-being.
Yeah, and I know later on you're going to ask about leadership well-being, but I think one of the things for staff well-being is definitely lead by example. So
yes.
you can't say, look, you've got to switch off if you don't switch off yourself. You've got to lead by example, otherwise there's a guilt and a question. I know there was a really strong head in the region, a good friend of mine, and he said, one of my leadership team always has to be in on a Friday or a Saturday. Obviously, the weekend here is Friday, Saturday. One of them has to be in. I said, why is that? He said, well, because staff come in. I said, but staff come in by choice. If, I wouldn't criticise. If someone wants to get their classroom ready, that's their choice. And I don't say, you don't need to inflict that on someone else because they're coming in. So for me, that was just so counterproductive, because then that member of staff seeing the leadership in thinking, the leadership's in, I've now always got to go in. It's like a vicious circle. So I think lead by example and don't feel guilty about self-care. The board employ me to be on top of my game. I want my staff to be on top of their game. To be on top of your game, you need to take downtime. So I don't think you should feel guilty about that. It should be done regularly, and it should be. I think the analogy I use is you can't give from an empty bowl. So if the staff member's bowl's empty, how can you expect them to give student well-being? It just won't work. So practical things we've done. I know in the national newspaper a couple of weeks ago, there was an article about email curfews in schools. I've been doing that for 10 years. We don't allow emails to be sent not from parents. Parents can send them when they want, but I don't allow staff to send emails after 5:30 at night. and they're not to send them before 6:30 in the morning. There's so much technology here. Delay send, schedule send, put it in draft. You can type it at 10 at night if that helps your well-being to switch off. But don't send it, because then you're putting your concerns onto someone else. So put it in draft. You feel better for typing it. Probably better to reflect on it in the morning as well before you send it. Think, actually, yeah, I could tailor that better by 24 hours, whatever. But we've been doing that. And from our staff, we have a regular I think it's once a term. It might be once half term, but once a term, we have a wellbeing survey amongst staff. Really simple questions. How are you? Is there anything we can do better? What are the stress points? Those sort of questions. I might have a focus if that's what you want. And 100% has been positive feedback about the email curfew. And now the trick of it is not just to do it, but celebrate that you're doing it and tell parents that it's happening. And then suddenly you get less emails from parents because they think, I'll write during the hours. We're not stopping parents, but they then have concern, if you sell it correctly, that the teachers have downtime. So they say, actually, I can delay my email to them and not send it at 9 at night. And, we tell staff not to open emails after 5:30 because it plays on your mind. So that's a massive thing.
That's huge.
Yeah, and it was more and more schools doing it. For me, it's the real crux that's helped our staff wellbeing because they don't feel guilty. The head has instructed them, that's when you switch off. So it's coming from the top. Any initiatives or systems we're putting in place, does it support the teacher workload? That's a big thing on wellbeing. Have that question. There's sometimes then you just can't get around it, but if you can make sure if it's easing pressure, that helps. We have a wellbeing committee at school. So it's not one person, it's not a champion, it's a culture we're trying to create. We haven't got it yet, but it's a culture we're trying to create. And they have a Wellbeing Wednesday. So there's things sent out, there's discounts at this place, or, have you tried this, or there's some yoga. And we send out techniques of meditation, all different things. It's not everybody's going to be doing it, but it might hook one or two people and then they feel better for it. If it helps one person, it's better than not helping anybody. I tend to not stay in the office. And the way I can do that is I schedule when I'm going to be looking at my emails during the day. Now, I know teaching with a phonetic class base, you can't always do that. But from the leader's perspective, I try to schedule when I'm going to open my emails in the day. But the wellbeing piece that comes out of that, it enables me to walk around school. And when I walk around, I talk to people and I just say, how are you? If you do it regularly, if you and I met over 3 weeks, and I wasn't feeling too good, even if you asked me how it was every day, you'd notice a slight difference in my reply. And then you think, actually, I might just chat to their line manager, just check in on them. So you don't pick up everything, but my leadership team regularly ask, how are you? Can we help? What's going on? Open dialogue. It goes back to the question you said, we're not afraid to talk about wellbeing. And that's a big thing. And step in and help. I think leadership, I talked about me teaching, but all my leadership team teach. Even my bursar takes after school activities when they're running. So, everybody contributes. So step in and help. So I think 2 of the parents who see me every day actually think I just do traffic because I'm always doing the traffic outside. But that means someone else isn't having to. I've got a bit more flexibility of time, or if someone's on duty and they've got a lot of marking on, we don't always get it right, but try and say, look, nip off for 20 minutes, I'll do this. So those sort of things, just being kind to each other and trying to help out and looking out for each other is the sort of culture we're trying to create.
Yeah, I like the tips and the strategies that you're using, because I ask this question quite regularly of many, many school leaders, and I hear some things and sometimes I wonder, do they really have an understanding of what it is to take care of someone's well-being? You almost have to think of your staff as a member of your family. Now, I know it's a bit extreme, but that is really how you have to look at it. And so sometimes I get these answers like, oh, we leave them a chocolate in their pigeonhole and we write them notes, and we sometimes allow them to have a staff lunch together. And I go, those are all great. But if they're at night at home when they should be with their partner and children, or themselves if they're single, if they're answering your emails, if they're filling out a useless piece of paperwork that will get filed and never looked at again, you are not doing anything for their well-being. If you don't know that they're sad and they've been sad for 2 months, you are not doing anything for their well-being. If you don't know that they've lost a family member and are grieving, then how are you helping their well-being? I think it comes down to taking care of people. And that's really what we ought to be pushing in schools as leaders.
I think that agenda, I know, schools and a lot of results driven. In a way, we have to because society tells us to go that way. And so we can't break away totally. If we do the things that you're saying, that, be kind, look out for each other, treat our colleagues as close to family. And some are family here, aren't they? If you think about it, if you've got no other family, your best friends here are effectively your family network.
Yes.
So if you treat people like that, and, you can have the conversations where you're not happy with something, but you have open conversations. I think all of that improves the classroom practice for the exams and the outcomes. Because going back to it, if staff's emotional bowl is full, then surely they can support students. But if it's empty, they're going to be drained.
Yeah, they are. And think about having a teacher who is anxious. We had an article in Teach Middle East, I think a couple of issues ago, about what it's like to teach as a teacher with anxiety.
Yeah.
And you think, wow, that person must be holding a lot together to get through the day, to get home, only to really sink into maybe a whole depression or a crying session or, really being under the weather well-being wise. So really we have to start looking out, I think, for each other. That's the best way. Now let's take it back to school leaders. You are a school leader. You're a headmaster. You're doing things to make sure that you're well so that you can take care of the people around you. Practically, what are some of the things you're doing? And I'm not saying people will do those things for themselves, but what are you doing?
Yeah, I think I've definitely experience helps. So in my first headship, I would say I was a workaholic, because I thought by volume meant would equal great output, and it doesn't. So I think I've become a lot smarter in how I look after myself and how I work. So I do start a bit later in the day than I used to. I used to come in about an hour and a half before school. And now I'm, 20 minutes, some days early if I need to be, but it's more my choice. So I start later. I don't burn the midnight oil as much as I have to. If I've got reports to write that or board meetings, that's part of my job. But I also feel it's important I set boundaries within that, and that doesn't become the norm. On my phone, I think technology is fantastic, but any systems we put in with technology should support us. We shouldn't become the slaves of it. So I've taken all notifications off of every app, so I don't get that addictive red circle coming up. So I open my WhatsApp or whatever it is. I'm not big on social media, but whatever I've got, any messages, I open it when I want to, not when my phone is telling me to. I have no emails on my phone. I don't have emails at all on my phone. So I have to make a conscious effort to walk to a computer to open an email. People might think, well, yes, that's a waste of time. It's not. It gives me time, because if I'm out kayaking with my wife and I've got my phone on me tracking my distance, I'm not looking at that and then seeing a red dot and going, oh, while I'm spending time with my wife of our time, I'm checking a work email. So I can't. I've taken them off. This was a great thing for me. I've actually gone to a shop and bought an old style alarm clock, and I've moved my phone out of my bedroom at night. I don't look. Yeah. People say, I just like reading before. Well, we'll read a book, read a Kindle, read something. But my phone, it was the other side of the room was my first step. And we've just converted a store area in our apartment to a little office downstairs, and I plug it in there. So it's not even in the same room as me now, and I'm sleeping a lot better. So yeah, that has been a major difference. I exercise regularly. So I exercise at least once a day, if not more, if I could. But I do have a family, so I can't disappear too often. But exercise regularly. I'm trying to eat a lot healthier. That was one of my bit of a glutton, but I'm trying to eat a lot healthier. And I find if I eat lighter in the day, I feel lighter. And I don't mean in weight, but sort of my mind. If I eat something heavy, I feel lethargic and sleepy. I have regular health checks. So I'm a great believer in prevention is better than cure. So at 52, your body's only on the decline, but I go and do regular health checks to make sure if there's anything, it's preventative rather than sort of reacting to it. I'm a great believer in coaching. I'm not a coach, but I'm a great believer. So at times when I've felt under stress, at the time when I was at school for 19 years, 9 of which as head, and this job came up, I went and had some coaching and took advice from someone outside of my circle. So I can't recommend that enough. People do it differently. I'm not a person who says I need a coach every week. I do it at a time when I'm struggling with something and I can't find an answer in my normal network, be it my wife, family, colleagues, etc. I go out and seek a coach to sort of try and put it in perspective for me, and that's been really useful. And I'm a great believer, if something's bugging you, because it plays on your mind and it plays on your heart and your emotions, go and talk about it with the person. Don't hold it back. And it doesn't have to be a conflict. You and I could disagree, but it doesn't mean we fall out. It just means we don't see the same perspective of that one thing. So I think very often a problem shared or aired is great for your uplifting of your well-being. And it takes that, almost that knot in your stomach or your heart that's bugging you, just releasing it like a pressure valve by just saying, look, I'm unhappy with this and I need to talk to you about it. And I quite often start the conversation, if it's professionally, saying, personally, I don't want to have this conversation, but professionally, I need to. So you put it in a context. And quite often, well, every time I've done that, it's been received and accepted in the way it's meant.
Yeah. You said something earlier. You said before you used to be a workaholic, but you've managed to sort that out yourself. A lot of leaders are riddled, like they get guilty if they're not working. They think, I'm missing something. Something should be done. How do they get over that guilt? What can they do?
You put it into a really nice phrase there. You say you were a workaholic. My wife would probably say I still am. But anyway, that's just a different perspective. Yeah, I think you've got to be brave. I genuinely, look, I've got a fantastic board of governors. I really have. And I've worked with them now for 6 years and we've developed each other. And one of the things I said to the board is, your priority in terms of the school operating is to look after me. I don't mean I'm your only focus, but if you're making sure I'm okay, I can make sure the next tier is okay, etc. So my board regularly check in on me. So I will say to them, guys, I'm away this weekend. Unless it's an emergency, I'm not contacted. I need some downtime. A bit like the wellbeing discussion, I will say to the board that I've been under quite a bit of pressure. I just need to step back a little bit. Be open. And they want me at the top of my game. The only way you'll get at the top of the game is by that stepping away and having those honest conversations with people around you. I've spoke to my team at times, my inner sort of SLT, and if one of them's struggling, I said, you need to step away for a bit, because I can see you may not be as effective as you want to be or can be. So that's that watching out for each other. So I think the riddled with guilt head, and it is hard, it's not easy, but I think you've just got to be courageous and say, look, for me to be at the top of my game, I need to get a balance here.
Yes. Yeah, I think it definitely takes courage because you know what you need to do to take care of yourself. The courage is to actually do it.
Agreed, 100% agree with that. It's the conviction of getting it done. We can all say it. And I'm sure things I've said in this podcast, there'll be bits I think, actually I've said it, I still want to do more about that. But as long as we're on the journey to say these are our goals, then, I'm sure I could do more about self-care, but I'm sure there's a lot more I could do about staff well-being that will impact student well-being. But we're starting the journey, so don't see it as a finished article or a destination. It's a journey.
Yeah. You mentioned student well-being. How is that being taken care of at BSAC?
Yeah, it's funny enough, it's actually one of my board targets this year. I think our wellbeing program, we've got some really good things in place, but I think it's been a bit scattergun. We haven't got any evidence of the impact of it. So we're trying to firm up, is what we're doing actually having a genuine impact? So we're trying to look at that, which we have as a past data, which is pupil attitude to self and school. And that gives you some great feedback. And then we're saying, okay, X looks okay, but students might get a bit over anxious compared to peers on exams. Do we need to do something about that? Are we putting too much pressure on students? So we're trying to actually do it from a position of actual knowledge where we have maybe gaps in our well-being. And it's in its infancy in terms of where we want to go, but it's a really exciting journey we're starting. We've just gone out to staff and asked every single member of staff, what does well-being look like, or what do you want well-being to look like for students? We've deliberately done that because we think if we can get the student bit right, we'll say, okay, in order for that to happen, what do we need to do for you? So we're sort of the building blocks, but the end result is if we can get it right for students and it means staff need to be looked after a bit better, then we need to do that. So I'm justifying it by going back to the students as the outcome.
Yeah. With the A levels being cancelled and exams, how are your students coping with that? Because that's a rite of passage. That's something that you look forward to for all of your school years.
Yeah, you're talking to a parent whose daughter didn't do her GCSE exams last year and son left school not having done his A-levels because they weren't on and didn't have all the closure. And I think that group haven't had closure. So you said rite of passage, you're right. It's the stress, the anxiety, the euphoria, the relief, the farewells, the tears, the hugs, the excitement, all of that. And they've missed a lot of it from what it's normally like. I think students during the pandemic, for me, it's not the academic. And I'm talking purely from our school. I can't speak about all other schools. I know there is some great stuff going on in lots of schools. My biggest concern is students missing things and also their daily interaction in school. I love students challenging us and asking questions. So why do we do it like this? Why can't we do it better? I love students disagreeing and testing the boundaries and learning about people and about how to deal with situations with people and all of the rich, wider curriculum. I think a lot of that's been missed for the last year and a half. And that's, for me, I hate people talking about a learning gap. In the UK, the government's saying, there's a learning gap. There isn't an academic learning gap. There's only a learning gap if you actually set exams that have work on it that students haven't covered. That's a learning gap, but that's a false gap. If you say, right, we believe there's an exam system where we can capture everything the students have done, and it isn't difficult, we don't need to worry about that gap. We just need to, if you want exams to test, we just need to test students on the things they've learned. That's fair. Don't test them on something they haven't learned and say there's a learning gap, so they need to miss their holidays and stay in school 24 hours.
You're the first person who said what I've thought. That is amazing. I've always said that. When I hear this, there's a learning gap, I go, I'm sorry, why is there a learning gap? You created the goalpost. Now move it. Exactly.
So I think going back to it, I think students have missed out on many things, of the well-being and the interaction and the social side, which is such a key factor in school, particularly when people go into the workforce. You think, yes, I've got 3 potential employees. They've all got the same grades. What's the difference? Well, this person can interact. This person's led a project. That's what you want. That's not on the exam that you sit in June, whatever. But I also think that students have learned a great deal about resilience. I think they've learned a great deal about coping strategies, and they haven't all got it right, just as we all haven't. But let's not say that the pandemic is only negative, because I think they've learned things that another set of year groups have never even had an opportunity to learn at that stage in their life. So I think there is ups and downs, but all in all, I'd rather it never have happened, but it has. So,
Yeah. I mean, I look at my own kids and they've become a lot more independent since the pandemic. They literally can take themselves online, and they're only 9 this year, and they can take themselves online. They can get into their classes. They can do when they were fully just online. And those things, I just sat there and marvel. They read their timetables, Mom, tomorrow we have to start this and we have to do that. And I'm amazed. I don't think they would have been that independent if they were full-time in school for the whole of 2020. So there are some good things that came out of it, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, as schools, why do schools have bells? They have bells because it goes back to Victorian times, so that you condition people to move when they're told to move. That's we've got bells here. I laugh with my head of secondary, Teresa, at my last school. Me and her, we worked together there, and I said, I want to take the bells away. And she said, no, we've got to keep them. And we had this debate. She left the school for a family circumstance 3 weeks before I was leaving. So in the last 3 weeks I wasn't brave enough to do it. And she said, I took all the bells away. But I genuinely think where the bells in school, and I'm using this as the analogy, conditioner, so, the student puts the book away. Being online and having that sort of no controls, they've managed that themselves. They've been independent, as you say. They know what websites to go on. They know how to get online. They know what work needs to be done. So I think there's some great things that we need to build on and take those positives forward with us and not lose them after the pandemic.
Yes. Yeah, that actually leads me very nicely into my last question, because it's been really fascinating conversation. Thank you so much, Mark. What are your hopes then for, schools going forward? And it could be as it relates to well-being or just in general.
Yeah, it's interesting. When we were in lockdown and a number of parents obviously had to support their children's learning at home, I think that was a real challenge for a lot of parents, myself included with my daughter. But it opened your eyes to what our professionals across all the schools do on a daily basis. And I really hope that feeling of euphoria when parents handed their children back to school, saying, please help me. They're yours now. But how great professionals are great at educating. I hope that feeling carries on forward. And I generally, that we could talk about, do we want 21st century learners and all those things? I think school has an obligation to support that regardless. And any school that doesn't is not going to last. But I hope we do have a focus on wellbeing and we focus on how we treat people. I think that's important, how we like to be treated. But how we like to be treated, we've got to mirror that on how we treat others. I hope that's an agenda going forward. I hope the profession is truly regarded as a profession. And it's a two-way thing here. I hope it's regarded as a profession. And from what I see of great teachers and great people coming out of teacher training, I've got real hope that it's going to be a fantastic profession moving forward. And I hope the challenges it faces, the question of those challenges is this making the educational experience better for students? Not how do we grade teachers better or how do we put this bureaucratic system in place? I hope we have a focus on everything we do has to benefit the students at the end of the day. And if you trace it back, that will help staff with training, etc. And we just have a really positive approach to education.
That is a fantastic note to end the podcast on. Thank you so much, Mark. It's been a real pleasure.
No, let's not leave it too long next time, but thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Teach Middle East podcast. Visit our website, teachmiddleeast.com, and follow us on social media. The links are in the show notes.